Because it was the sort of priority pest we needed to go after because it posed this potential damage. There was this need to then take every measure necessary to then eradicate it. So eradication, this term you'll hear a lot put out by the Department of Food and Ag here in California, is one that means we need to do by every means necessary, get rid of this pest. This was the reason that what is normally an environmental process in which we go through an environmental and health review, what's called the CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act process, was actually short-circuited, short-cutted. Because normally if something poses these threats, it goes through that process, there are public hearings, we can all participate in those, etc. But that process was actually skipped because of the way that this was classified, again, this ultimate classification. So that's what we're dealing with a lot now, is the fact that all of these normal processes that should be there for us to participate were shortcutted because of the emergency nature of it. So that's much of what we're dealing with now, which is different from, say, passing an ordinance at the very local level saying we're not going to take this. What other governments have done recently, Santa Cruz and Monterey, Santa Cruz is about to possibly pass something a little bit different. And what Albany did is pass resolutions, which are just sort of declaratory statements from government saying, we don't want this spray, do something else. And that's sort of a political message rather than an actual legal, you can't spray over us. And the reason for that is because local governments can't control, they can't stop the spray because it's a state agency says, we've got to control the moth, or we've got to eradicate, the moth, so they can actually preempt what's the ability of local governments. This does get to some other fundamental issues of local government's ability to deal with pesticide issues. I know Frank has experienced this firsthand in Marin, but the ability of local governments, particularly around pesticide issues, because of things that were passed in the 70s, much around the time of this MERT stuff, these pesticide preemption laws stop local governments from being able to regulate around pesticide issues. So there are lots of large, big picture issues here around inert ingredients that Carolyn raised around pesticide preemption, the inability of local governments to regulate the use of pesticides, the ability of, to have the rights of local governments to stop chemical trespass. These are all big picture items. What's sort of happening in the interim is, again, the state is planning to spray, was to roll out, well, in the next few weeks it's planning to roll out, and already is rolling out, some of the methods it's using on the ground. And some of those already raise questions, releasing wasps into certain environments, using the subtract and kill with permethrin, all these different things which you can hear about. I think information is in the back.
These are alternatives.
These are alternatives, could be alternatives, but again, they raise questions because they again didn't go through the environmental impact process as they should.
In fact, it may be all of them.
It may be all of them. And interestingly, they have released a map at which where the Department of Food and Ag intends to use different methods, but that's not for sure. It also has zones, which you can see there where it intends to eradicate with the spray. What that spray in is, as John alluded to, could be one of 4 options that are being tested in New Zealand right now, which will then be brought back to us like the first week of April, and the CDFA will roll out which one of these it intends to use. And then starting likely in June is what they're saying, Monterey and Santa Cruz will be sprayed to eradicate, and then moving northwards into August, likely in the San Francisco Bay Area. Again, those are not definite, but those are sort of likelihoods of what's to happen. So in the interim, we have a lot of work ahead of us. I don't want to knock the amount of incredible work that's already been done. I mean, the amount of organizing, the lawsuits filed, the forced disclosure from the governor's office of inert ingredients, the amount, that several legislators are starting to actually take a stand on the issue. There's some hearings next week. Yeah, at the end we'll mention some of those things. But there's incredible movement, and it's only as a result of all the incredible citizen organizing that's been done by CAST, the California Alliance to Stop the Spray, and StopTheSpray.org, the online organizing, the in-person meetings with city councils. I mean, city councils down there are the most adamant opposing spraying because they've heard so much from their citizens standing up in hearings going, stop this. That's not perfect because we haven't stopped it yet. But the amount of organizing, participation from local citizens, emails, letters, phone calls, is forcing these people to take a stand. There are 6 pieces of legislation that are being currently considered in the legislature related to this issue. There are still lawsuits pending with the city and county of Santa Cruz. There are measures being taken. And so I don't want to knock those efforts. There's an incredible amount of work that's been done, and we are accomplishing a lot. I mean, there's a reason that a $500,000 PR firm was contracted to try and convince us of what to do. It wasn't because we were just sitting around, it's because of the active organizing of folks in this room and outside. The California Department of Food and Ag itself, the head of that agency, his name is Kawamura, A.G. Kawamura, could actually pull up the plug and say, don't do this. The governor could actually, because he's part of the governor's cabinet, the governor could say, do this. The question, though, is actually ultimately, can USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, say, well, we don't care if you want to do that, this is the program we're going to force down your throats. And that's, again, that's a larger question of sort of state versus federal authority, which no one has sort of waded into, because those are a lot of the debates, this day and age.
Right now, it's all been driven from the state. What goes on when we discuss whether,
well, as far as we know.
As far as we know, the state is mandating this program, so like our efforts, legislative-wise and such, have all been focused at the state to try to deal with it there. But there is sort of an overlooming question: if we were successful, would the federal government suddenly appear and the curtain would be removed? And would there be something else going on?
But the program was funded by the federal government for the next year. This 2008 program, it was $75 million given by the federal government.